Lumbuye oli enemy wa Uganda nambe because you're ashaming.
Abona omwana ani amuwadde essimu obabbye essimu ya muganda we bayatale kwanga bambi ali totally isolated from reality. I am not here to defend Lumbuye. Ayogedde ku kintu kye bayita ba bloggers bakuba eggwanga. Okay. Katugende mpola mpola. Advisory travel ban gye bataddeko ya Ebola. Ani yaleeta Ebola mu Uganda? Bali ba bloggers oba government yennyini nyini. Mu 2025 njagala Education Ministry ya Health yavayo ne tugamba nti Uganda yafunye Ebola outbreak. Kino wano ya 2025. Onako wairo travel advisory gye bataddeko sanction eyo kuba nti no ba investors tebalina kujja mu Uganda kyavudde ku Ebola. Okitegera kyavudde ku Ebola. Government yennyini nyini yagamba nti no tulina Ebola mu 2025. Am I right? Ekyo kyava kulumbiye n'aba bloggers oba government yennyini yakyekolera. Okitegera. Number 2, boogera ku corruption. Kyogamba ba bloggers bagamba Anita Amongo nabbanja okuba nti no ba officials ababba sente z'omuliwo omusolo tebakwatwako wabula government eba elevating ne bongere ebifo. Kyogamba ba bloggers babikola. Okitegera. Ba bloggers babikola. Then number 2 tusoke tunulire. Nabbanja yabba amabaati kwali kusaga y'amabaati takwatibwako. She's untouchable era ne ku luno ku cabinet ebya bakulaga nti no era ye minister ye prime minister we Gwanga okitegera yakulira government business. Tegeza government business omanye ekyo kifoma kye kikola okimanyiko okitegera. Ne tutunulira omusajja abadde awemula Obuganda gwe bayita Samu Mayanja abadde awemula Obuganda n'okulumbanga kabaka nga amuvuma wabula bamu elevating ne bamufuula ne Antony General. Kyogamba ebyo bifo ba bloggers be babigaba okitegera mwe abaana ba NRM ne PLU muyige reasoning abantu be mudiringa nabo we are another generation from another planet be mudiringa nabo mujja tuleetako ezo shallow minds zammwe. Tesawe ntogera ku Uganda twagala ku shapinga Uganda etali mu musayi kye twagala okukola okitegera. Temulowooza nti crash okuba nkuwuliddeawo bragging no ku bragging mu kyokola ba General Muhoozi Kainerugaba aleeta abantu bano wansi ba bloggers abagezaako okwogera ekyo bakita freedom of speech and expression. Kitegeeza nti General Gwowaana alinyirira eddembe ly'obuntu okwogezaako okuprovinga ba blogger kye boogera nti eddembe ly'obuntu lirinyirirwa General Muhoozi Kainerugaba kakati ate naawe indirectly ate naawe kyoyogedde okitegeera ekintu ekyo. So batonna kwata kwetunuzaamu simu sooka olowooze nga byogenda okwogera okitegedde. Otherwise petugamba these atrocities can stop. This will stopping a freedom of speech neberawo freedom of expression. Olaba King Charles yali atikirwa. King Charles gwenjogerako beba colonial masters aba twogera ku British Empire as ba successors ba British Empire betwogerako yali atikirwa nga atambula ku mukolo gw'amatikira atambula ayita mu bantu ne bamukuba amaje amavundu okiga naye ate jeno ye kumwogera ku bwogeza ate otuwanira mu nateeka wansi. Government byekola byennyini bye bigiteeka ku ttaka. Sente za Arua hospital zabbibwa. Kyogamba ba blogger bibazibba oba Lumbuye yasooka okubyogerako muno sente za Arua zibbibwe. Mukitegera ekintu ekyo. So baana mmwe aba PLU ne NRM please you understand gundi ya mu reasoning ya mutusobola kugenda nayo mu parliament eddako ni Uganda timusobola. So muddeyo musooke muyige ebintu bye mugenda okwogera then mutandike ng'okwogera okitegera ekintu ekyo. That is the problem with the patriotic tendencies bana ze balina bana bali patriotic. That is why nakugamba nti ono omusangira nga no wa national unity platform nga naye byayogera byebya kugamba kakati muve ku bakulembeze muve ku kibiina. That patriotic tendencies ze mulina. Let us think of Uganda. Togere ku Uganda katwagala Uganda ani ayonona Uganda government oba mwe mujonona okitegera. Bogera ku human rights violations ozimanyi the abductions ezigenda mass kyogaba bloggers bezikola wachi ate babikolera mu kamera okigira. Then njagala tutunye ku tweets za General Muhoozi Kainerugaba yennyini go defending esawe no boyogera kabra aleta abantu once njagala tutunye media handles ze wezitambuza okigira ekintu ekyo. So mwe baana mmwe muddeyo musomero muyige generation gye mugenda okudiringa nayo mmwe mubadde mukulira ku bulu bandi nga bakitamwe bamanyi nti no dynasty bagizimba ate lyagenda bagambako abuli kimu mugenda kubera ku soft land. Little did he know a generation is coming. The unruly generation eteetaaga kumanya a reasoning ne kuteeka wali eri kati mujjukidde okugenda okuva ku bulu bandi na it is too late yeah. Batuyita bakana kambata we took chances okukola research ne twagala okumanya nti kakati the next Uganda egenda kuvaana netya kati mwe bagenza bajja ku bulu bandi n'enshabwe nga kiri too late. It is too late yeah. Mwina okuddayo kakati mwe emyaka 4 mutandika okusoma kati mutandike musobole okufitinga ku levels of otherwise that childish reasoning tegenda kukola mweno ni Uganda. So well, if you want to reason, talk about the atrocities as related to Uganda. Otunuuliranga ensonga what scares away the investors to come. But no ebifaananyi ebigenda mu maaso ku medias, not only ku bloggers bokka, wabula ne medias zammwe NTV, NBS ziraga atrocities twali mu kalulu nga balaga nti mukuba abantu emigo ne mubaasa n'emitwe, amagye gennyini nga gakuba abantu emigo ne gaasa n'emitwe. Tulina Amnesty report. Amnesty report ba blogger be bagikola oba atrocities zakolebwa government. Go and look at the Amnesty report yafuluma. Yali yaki? Byali yogera ku biki kyogaba bloggers be bagikola. So mwe ba blogger ba NRM abefuula nti mu defending muleso waneno bi blame game. The problem is the government itself and its officials bafere. Okitegera babbi. For as long as you don't get rid of that, then in the army buli ali maje buli aline mundu alowooza nti ayina monopoly kuli ne Gwanga, buli aline mundu agikozesanga bwayagadde yamanyi nti naye emundu bagimuwadde kufugako party ya Uganda yabana Uganda oppressing abantu batalina mundu. You are the problems to the government. Mwewe nyini mwe kizibu kya Uganda mwe. So don't blame your mistakes for anybody else. Ezo travel advisory gendo otule wanso tuze ntweyo otunulie lwaki Uganda bagikubye ezo travel advisory sanctions okuba nti no ba investors tebagenda kujja. Mwerangiriyako ebirwadde olwokubanga mwagala okufuna sente za Ministry ya Health ne za World Health Organizations. Okitegera ne mutandika okugenda nga mwerangiriyako ebirwadde. Kakati ebirwadde byamwe babyawadde ate mubibule mingira abantu. Okitegera Ebola ne mamba gani yabirangirya mbadde nga babyali mu 2025. Okitegera ate ba bloggers bonenya ne bagezaako okubirwanyisa ne bagamba nedda mulimba tetubirina. Kakati ani abeera thinking essaawa eno bakutaddeko travel ban y'ebyo, bakutaddeko travel ban ya terrorism, bomu zaakuba mu Uganda, bomu zaakuba. Tugambe nti bomu ezo temwaziraba ne mulangirya mu bennyini nti obutujjubuze mu Uganda, bomu temwaziraba ezaakuba ku Matazi Shrine, zakuba ku Matazi Shrine nezikuba Katale Kaleerwe. Okitegera saali bomb, there were bombs ani yazikuba kimugaba blogger bazikuba. Okitegera so government yekola ebijijjako mwana muwala dayoso mogezezzaako bambi naye generation gy'odiyinga nayo ndala nkiddamu generation gy'odiyinga nayo ndala. Kakati taata wo abanga ye yakuwadde script nagamba muno jangu ogisoma otunuulize lumbuye munoonyayo okublaminga then muteekeko ne ba bloggers abalala okwongera okujustifying okutta kw'abantu n'ekiwamba abantu ekigenda mu maaso. Mukwano ekyo genda obali kalala akumubaze kafu akapande osomye kafu nkiddamu akapande musomye kafu akapande kano kasoma maje ate go osoma maje so gana maje go diringa na gaga people power. Mukwano wano wo tutadde kana akazanyo ka reasoning tojja kumalako tojja kumalako. So you need to do better than that. Okitegeera ekintu ekyo you need to do better than that. So bana abaana be mu trainings okujja okugezaako ku defending ate bannatuuka kufuluma ssomero, they have not graduated yet. Abaana be badiringa nabo babayita bakana kamba atabatabbu Kyagulanyi yaleeta generation ey'etabbu. So bano ba half-baked students mutandise okureleasinga ku media tebagenda kumalako, tebajja kumalako because we know the problem. Where the problem is, it is the government itself because of its greed for power, corruption and embezzlement that is going on in government institutions. Okitegera ze zirese ebizibu okutuusa wano wetuli. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. Okitegera ekintu kisenga te what is abduction since 2021. Honorable Muwanga Kivumbi kyogamba lumbuye yabawamba ne ba bloggers be babawamba tunulya bayasini machete wachi bakwati. Why aren't they produced in court? Babobi Yanga, why aren't they produced in court? Tunulya investigations crimes ezibaddewo against humanity kyokaza ba bloggers be bazikola. So mwe bwana mmwe musoke mudemu yige then mulyoke mujje mutandika okuizoninga. Otherwise baagala kubata mujje mu society atenge ekituufu kiri nti you are still half baked. Temulina kye mumanyi ku politics, temulina kye mumanyi ku geopolitics, temulina mukyali bwana butonyo. Ffe tujja bazza mu ssomero nkiddamu fetujja bazza mu ssomero because you are dealing with a totally different generation. I repeat, you are dealing with a totally different generation. Abatalya ku blue band, fetuli ba blue band na nshabwe. Naye mwali yange nshabwe ne blue band nga mutula ababaleetera buleetezi buli kimu kifunira ku silver platter. Kakati mugenda kukiwulira nkiddamu mugenda kukiwulira ate kati bagezaako banyigiriza bagezeeko okufiitinga mufe kubanga reasoning ebasusse. Reasoning ebasusseko ekituufu kiri nti don't blame anyone, blame the government that you support for the atrocities that are leading to Uganda into a total mess. Government yekubye Uganda ekigo, yekubye Uganda ekigo. Ba bloggers tugezezzaako okulabula abantu bano, tugezezzaako bagamba ebintu byandibadde bikwatibwa bwe bati naye olwokubanga mukwano they have money and guns, they think it is going to rule over us. No, it is not only guns that rule and money, but you need people. Otegera, you need people. So little girl, get back to school. You are dealing with a different generation. Mutawa faces tulinganga abafaanagana mwe tulina abantu abakulu zispiriti zaffe z'abantu bakulu. So mukyali bwana butonyo respect. Okitegedde ekintu
In the last installment, in which I presented what I considered Uganda's 3 big threats, I received 2 questions among many that came from all of you who watched that video that I want to answer today. The first question I received is this: is Uganda's export work and Uganda's economy hurt by recent actions against some of the country's media houses and the operators of some of the online channels that were arrested, along with opposition and civic activists? That was a question you asked among many. Now, I have looked at the numbers since September 2025. This is just about the time when the national election fever and campaigns were picking up. And then I stretched up to the just ended month of June 2026. Even with the trade disruptions in the Gulf, pushing fuel prices up, even with increased fertilizer costs for agriculture and restricted travel, and the very sad episode of Ebola and how it was reported in the international media, I have seen that Uganda's export growth has kept a steady rise. In fact, we have been in this period close to almost $1.4 billion a month worth of exports. Foreign direct investment, or FDI, has kept a healthy pace at United States $3.3 billion. It is only the arrivals at Entebbe International Airport, when I checked the month of April and the month of May, the numbers had a drop of 7.9, a drop. However, this does not account for other border posts. People kept coming in, people kept spending money in our country. This is partly why I think the shilling has held within a minimum band and no wild swings. Even through elections until now, our exchange rate has remained a little bit stable. Generally, our exports were up 25% in the month of April 2026 than the same month of April in 2025. That is therefore to say that the fundamentals of our economy, things such as inflation, consumption, manufacturing, investment, innovation in some of the enterprises, in agriculture, the agricultural production, the increases we have had, all these are fairly sound. Yesterday, when I spoke at the East African community and I visited the exhibition at Parliament, I saw a number of companies that 10 years ago, when I met their owners, I visited them, 10 years ago they were simply importing steel coils. What I saw today is that they make reinforced steel for construction of bridges, even have had more product range that we didn't have a couple of years ago. Now, investment and innovation, even if it is low, has kept improving, albeit slowly, I should say. These fundamentals tell me that we can withstand pressure long enough to overcome these short-term problems if we keep pulling together on sound policy, we don't change policies rapidly halfway, and we keep timely execution on projects. And both of these values are most under threat today in Uganda: policy and execution. Together, we can lessen the negative impact of bad politics. We can reject corruption and the abuse of power. We can fix many of the areas where we are weak. Emperor Augustus Caesar, who expanded the Roman Empire, used to tell his officers, he used to say, you must make haste, but slowly. And that sounds a contradiction, because you can't move very fast and at the same time slowly. In Latin, it is festina lente, festina lente. It means that speed without judgment creates problems. That you need a commander or a leader and forces that are cautious, You speak out. I suspect the interest that you had in asking is that we should keep Uganda growing, especially in respect to the rule of law and the treatment of opinions that might often offend those in power. I suspect you are saying to me the country should continue to protect the right to dissent by those who oppose our views or our approach to issues. Why do I think you are saying this by your questions without being open? Because the United States dollar's $500 billion economy in 14 years that the president has set a target for us requires, listen to this, at least 35,000 megawatts of electricity to power this growth. That is what the economies with this kind of GDP have in energy generation and usage. Now, if we were building a service economy, you could say, well, go slow on power generation and invest elsewhere. But I tell you, the president and all of us want to rapidly industrialize. We want to convert much of our mineral and agricultural potential into finished high-value goods. Well, to achieve this, we must generate 16 to 20-fold energy increase from the current 2,000 in only 14 years to 35,000 megawatts. We must therefore combine solar, geothermal, gas, hydro, and much more. That kind of economy requires us to triple our cargo transportation capacity on water, on the roads, on rail, and air infrastructure. That kind of economy requires a lot of inward investment at a sectoral level. Now, to generate this kind of energy in the energy sector, for example, we need to invest United States dollars 120 billion in generation, in transmission, and in distribution. Where do you get this money from? You need money from everywhere you can find. In the private sector, worldwide. Through sovereign wealth funds, you borrow worldwide. Through domestic pension and capital markets, you participate there to raise that money. Through finding new sources of FDI. That's the way you get this kind of money in energy that fast in 14 years. That kind of investment does not come if we are quarreling, or we are lying about each other, or we are stifling civic dissent. I want you to know that it is the negative conversations we have in Uganda that some of the investors hear, they listen, and they choose to go elsewhere. Now, Ugandans, to face each other and deal with our differences is what will lessen dissent and bad media. I want you to know that in a true democracy, dissent and bad media never ends. It is only reduced by consistent, good communication from those who hold power. It is reduced by teaching responsible citizenship to the young. Now, to grow management capacity, the one that is necessary for manufacturing, to absorb more talent of our youth, we must keep the country communicating. And it must communicate freely without fear. For example, Uganda just entered a very large financial agreement to purchase aircrafts from Boeing. Boeing is an American company. This is so that we can have more what you call cargo freighters to take cargo to markets and passengers. To return this big investment, we must keep good publicity for Uganda, as well as dignified treatment of those whose opinions offend us. I want you to know that we grow by listening, by talking to each other, and by restraint. I have personally been a subject of insults and lies for a very long time. And I have options. And my options are silence if what they are saying is just rubbish. I ignore it. Or answer if I feel there is some sense in what someone is saying or go to court when I feel deeply aggrieved. Sometimes I reach out to convince the liars, because there are many, to open their eyes to the truth. I try to teach them to avoid hate and stereotyping other people simply because they don't like them. It is a choice that I make because I know to keep our country together and avoid unnecessary tension, we need to tone down. Shall we be able to jail all the liars in the country? No, it is not possible. But can we use the law and transparent, dignified methods to hold them accountable? Yes. And I think we should do our best to achieve that. Now, I have also received calls from the East African region, especially from the business community, about the safety of foreign assets in Uganda. Now, I would like to assure all those expressing worry and doubt that Uganda is growing and it will deal with its problems if more and more of your voices stay with the truth and work for a better tomorrow. I had been concerned about capital repatriation, which I suspected would be driven by pre- and post-election fears from the market. But the numbers, I thank God, show that confidence has remained, even with all the trade disruptions we have had in the Middle East and the negative reporting. But one thing I'm unhappy about is that United States dollars 1.17 billion has left the country in this period, mainly through dividend payouts or firms exiting the market or pressures on the shilling or debt servicing. Our data tends to have gaps, so it doesn't allow us to see all the aspects, especially in the informal sector. But I think we might be losing more. Now, for example, when someone sells a company and exits, we don't very quickly know how much and why. Now, my concern is that we could and we should invest a portion of this money in the country instead of repatriation. Can we not keep the mining sector, the oil sector, the banking sector, the telecom sector, real estate construction firms, where a lot of this money ends leaving the country? Can we not work with those sectors to keep the money in? Can we not provide more opportunities in the economy, this young, growing economy? I am confident the economy will overcome these pressures if we keep working together and hold back this money. All I ask is that we should work together to protect the rule of law and to talk more to each other and use less force. He or she who has power always sets the tone of the conversation for the one who does not. So we can't teach others what we don't practice ourselves. This is one set of questions. The second set of questions I want to answer today is to do with the assessment, my assessment of the movement and my apparent optimism that the movement, the NRM, is reformable. You know, in fact, one person said, Rwabogo, you are naive to think that the NRM can recover and have its values again. Well, I thank you for this feedback. But this straight through accountable leadership, building it from district level, and regular teaching of what it means to live these values of the last 60 years. Even the matter of how we fund our activities in the movement, we should allow members to have a stake, to have some equity by contributing as low as 500 shillings a month or a year, those who have low means. Article 43 of the NRM Constitution actually allows us to do this, but we never put it to operation. The money that you put on an account in your district party coffers is money you want to participate in decisions about. You want to know how it is spent. You question how it is used. But money that comes as donations from the top at election time tends to be abused. You know why? Because people see no consequences for this abuse. It is money that comes from outside their area of jurisdiction and thinking, and they don't value it as money that they have raised on their own. Sometimes prevention can fail. So if prevention fails, then treatment should kick in. For a living organism, treatment can mean injections or even amputation. Now, no one likes injections, and worst of all, an amputation. However, a good doctor, let's call it a good leader, should be able to save the rest of the body, to save a life, if the risk of death is high, by an amputation of what has gone wrong. Leaders must take action against those who you teach, who you provide for, and they still continue to infect others with impunity. Those need to be exposed and cut off so that the rest of the body can survive. Now, develop the moral courage to confront hard decisions. The NRM can do this. I will return later, next week, on the matter of options available to the movement in this transition period, and present what I think leaders can do to study from the rest of the world. I am your friend, Rwabogo.